Well, the people of New Orleans are having a rough go of it. This Democratic stronghold has seen a large spike in homicides lately. Gee, I wonder why. Well, after watching tonight's show, you'll know why. Now, is it funny? Well, I don't live in New Orleans, so sure. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
All right, the title says it all. Woke British prosecutor, that's right, she's from England, actually Scotland, is slammed for dropping cases against 15 gun suspects arrested during New Orleans Mardi Gras after city became U.S. murder capital. It's not funny there, Johnny Walker Dread. Be serious. Yeah, okay. Let's now watch a little news clip that will give us a little hint of what's going on in New Orleans.
More about one of the suspects the Orleans DA's office refused to prosecute after an arrest for illegally carrying a machine gun in the French Quarter during Mardi Gras.
As David Jones reports, Assistant District Attorney Emily Maw dropped the charge against him and more than a dozen others. David.
A decision by one of the top prosecutors in the Office of New Orleans District Attorney Jason Williams to dismiss more than a dozen weapons cases has been highly criticized both by watchdog groups and by Williams himself. In one of those cases, the suspect may have broken a federal law.
This particular case, I think, is the most egregious of all 19 cases.
Orleans District Attorney Williams faces more scrutiny for the actions of one of his top prosecutors. One of the individuals who walked free on Mardi Gras, Keaton Mungavi, was accused of carrying a machine gun. The gist report, which a prosecutor has on hand during a first appearance bail hearing, says, quote, officers conducted a stop of the subject at Bourbon and Conti. It says they found the gun and, quote, back at the station, the officers observed the handgun was equipped with the machine gun conversion device, making the handgun a fully automatic firearm.
We'll continue to fire until either you pull your finger off the trigger or the magazine runs out of ammunition.
Fox 8 has reported on so-called Glock switches, which the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms says has become more prevalent.
Somebody who uses a machine gun in furtherance of a drug trafficking offense or a federal crime of violence, such as carjacking, the sentence enhancement is 30 years. That's in addition to whatever the underlying charges are.
This is a felony. This is a weapon that has been converted from a semi-automatic into an automatic.
President of the Metropolitan Crime Commission, Rafael Goyeneche, says Assistant District Attorney Emily Maw dropped the ball, whether purposefully or out of neglect. The release of the arrested subjects was conditioned on giving up their weapons.
Normally, when charges are refused, you get your property back. But because in magistrate court, she said the state will refuse the charges if you, the arrested subject, agree not to reclaim your firearm. That's a give and take. That's a contract. That was done in open court on the record.
Mungavi, according to the gist sheet, is from Chattanooga and had at least 2 prior arrests for possession of a firearm in February and March of 2021.
But when you see an out-of-state suspect with a felony charge for a fully automated handgun, and he has priors, I think this in and of itself is enough to question Emily Maw and her decision making.
Ma also dismissed a sexual battery case and a criminal trespassing case. Meanwhile, Mungavi could still face potential federal charges. We did reach out to the ATF, and we are waiting to hear back. And the U.S. Attorney's Office says if the case fits the criteria, they will take it on.
Okay, so a few notes about that. First of all, you'll notice the man who's shooting that automatic handgun, he's obviously a very trained individual. But you also saw how difficult it is for him to keep that thing on target. As soon as he pulled the trigger, it went up. And if you put the automatic handgun in the hands of a kid, the automatic feature probably does the victims a favor because it's almost impossible for an untrained shooter to hit much of anything with it on fully automatic. Semi-automatic is far more deadly. And that's the reason why the military almost always shoots in semi-automatic mode. What's automatic for? Well, that's suppression. You basically put the gun in automatic and you just spray it out to try to keep the enemy's head down. Okay, so the big hubbub about automatic weapons and machine guns, it's overblown. They have never been responsible for very many crimes in this country, even when they were legal. Most of the killings that you saw with machine guns was actually in the movies. So let's read this article. A man from Tennessee who was arrested in New Orleans for carrying a modified machine gun along the city's famous Bourbon Street has had his case dropped by a woke prosecutor from the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office. Keaton Mangave is among 15 people who were arrested in the Crescent City during Mardi Gras this past week, and who had their charges dropped. The decision to drop the cases was made by Assistant District Attorney Emily Ma. Ma, who now heads the Civil Rights Unit. Wait, what? Why is the person who heads the Civil Rights Unit dropping charges against a person for having illegal guns? Don't know. Previously worked for Innocence Project New Orleans for 16 years before transferring to the DA's office 2 years ago. Now look, I have nothing against the Innocence Project. I think they do great work. They're going through and finding cases where people were unfairly charged or convicted and having their sentences reduced and whatnot. But it's not prime recruiting material for a prosecutor. I mean, people who work for the Innocence Project typically don't become prosecutors. Why? Well, because a prosecutor has to have a little bit of moxie in them to go after criminals. And people who work for the Innocence Project are typically not of that ilk. Okay? Fine people, got nothing against them, but they're not prosecutor material. She refused to proceed with the charges on conditions that the weapons seized from those arrested not be returned to them. So in other words, they had to give up their toys. It's like, oh, Mom, what are you going to do? Well, you're not going to get your PlayStation back. You've been a bad boy. So I'm going to keep it. I'm going to lock it away and not let you use it. Yeah, that's kind of what happened here. Now, let me ask you a question. Does she look like a prosecutor? Really? All right. And there's Jason Williams, and he's the one that's pointing his finger at her, but in reality, he's just as guilty. He's the one that hired her. And all of this would have been no problem, but the media got a hold of it. And they pointed their fingers at him, and he turned around and said, not my fault. It's Emily. It's Emily. It's her. It's her. Mangave, in particular, had been charged with unlawful possession of a machine gun and illegal carrying of weapons. Officers saw Mangave walking around with a gun and later discovered that the gun had been converted into a fully automatic weapon. Despite the egregious nature of the alleged crimes, Ma refused to prosecute the case along with 14 others. Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams has since distanced himself from the decision, calling the attorney's actions improper and unrepresentative of office policy. In other words, she doesn't speak for me. I'm not like that. Leave me out of this. But who hired her? Williams has pledged to conduct an internal review. But what internal review? There's nothing to review. He got busted. She let him go. I mean, there it is. And take appropriate measures to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Does that mean firing her? No. In a statement released Thursday, Williams said Ma, who was assigned to review the cases during first appearances on Tuesday in magistrate court, deviated from the office's standard practices, which include a thorough screening process for every charge. Basically, what that means is she didn't know that he had priors. He could have been a wanted murderer for all she knew. It was not immediately clear whether authorities could choose to renew prosecution of the suspects. The statement said Williams had ordered an extensive internal review of the cases, and that his office was taking appropriate remedial measures. Remedial? Okay. I guess they have to take algebra and learn the fundamentals of writing to prevent similar unauthorized activity in the future. I know what the word remedial means. Give me a break. The decisions made by Ma, who was a close ally of Williams in his campaign to bring a reforms, really poor English there, guys, to bring a reforms to the district attorney's office were seized on by Williams' critics, who have since questioned the results of his, get this, progressive policies amid a surge in violent crime, which has seen New Orleans become the murder capital of the U.S. They still don't get it. Progressive policies create crime. Talk to the people of Seattle sometime. The former director of Innocence Project New Orleans, Ma, who was educated in Edinburgh, had been a longtime advocate for wrongfully incarcerated people before she was brought into the DA's office by Williams in 2021 to head his office's newly created Civil Rights Division. I guess the civil right here is what? The Second Amendment? But I have a funny feeling that the Second Amendment is not really big on her radar. My gut feeling is, and I could be wrong, is that this Mangrave person or whatever his name is black. And that's the reason why her heart bleeds for him. Could be wrong. I tried to find a picture of him and couldn't. Her office had been tasked with digging into cold cases, reducing sentences handed down by non-unanimous juries, and reversing wrongful convictions. I have no problem with that. But again, this is not the kind of person you want in a prosecutor. You don't want the prosecutor and the public defender to be on the same side. When you do, you get spikes in crime. Her appointment was among a number of moves made by Williams that aligned with his progressive philosophy on the criminal justice system. But as the numbers of murders carjackings, and violent carjackings have increased in the last 2 years, Williams has since backpedaled on some policies, including a promise not to charge juveniles as adults. So, 17-year-old goes out and murders a whole bunch of people. I guess he would be tried as a juvenile. Unless it was, of course, Kyle Rittenhouse, in which case, well, you got to try him as an adult. Who in here thinks that if Kyle Rittenhouse had shot a bunch of people in New Orleans, that this guy would be all for trying him as a juvenile? Right. Give me a break. Oh, and here's the spike. Okay, so you have to understand how this is done. 2023 year to date. So up until the time that this was published, we're talking about the first 2 months, all right? All of these years here are the first 2 months. So it's comparing the same period, all right? And we have 19 in 2019, then it went up to 23, then 25, then 38, and now it's 41. 41 murders in the 2 months that we've had in 2023 so far. Progressive policies. You gotta love them. Okay, so there's some interesting homicide and carjacking statistics here. It's not pretty, but I'll let you guys go ahead and look at those on your own. I'll certainly post a link to this article in the description below. Democratic stronghold. New Orleans overtook Democratic stronghold St. Louis as the U.S. murder capital in the first half of 2022. So you have all these Democratic strongholds vying for murder capital of the U.S. And St. Louis had it, but doggone it, New Orleans rallied to overtake them, and now they have the crown. As the city struggles with its lowest police staffing level in modern history, and that's because they don't like cops there. Amid a crisis of officer morale. Gee, where have we heard that before? Let me see here now. A lack of officer morale, low police staffings, Oh, yeah, that's pretty much in every Democratic stronghold. And all you have to do is watch the online YouTube movie, Seattle is Dying, and you will see exactly what's happening here. And by the way, I recommend everybody to go watch that documentary, and it will tell you exactly what's wrong with these progressive policies. Let me put it in a nutshell here. Seattle used to be a really cool place to go. Now, you don't go there. Just stay the hell out of Seattle. In the first 6 months of 2022, New Orleans recorded 41 murders per 100,000 population, a higher homicide rate than any other U.S. city, according to Wall Street Journal analysis of data from whatever. By comparison, the first half murder rate per 100,000 was 11.5 in Chicago. This thing has 4 times the murder rate of Chicago. Oh my God. Oh, and by the way, it's important for all you to understand that the Democrats will come out and say, you see, Louisiana, it has such a high murder rate and it's a Republican state. No, it's not the Republican counties that are causing the problem. It's New Orleans. It's the Democratic strongholds in every one of these southern states that causes all of these high murder rates. So don't hand us that crap. According to the nonpartisan watchdog Metropolitan Crime Commission, the city recorded 280 murders in New Orleans in 2022. 280 on almost one every day. The highest number of killings in a single year since 1966. The group says that number equals about 70 homicides for every 100,000 residents. Whoa! 70! Now, keep in mind, I used to do a lot of crime statistics because I wrote grants for juvenile delinquency programs, okay? 70 is high. Man. Now, there are some little tiny towns that have higher, but that's only because, like, they only had a town of a size of 800 and they had a couple of people die. And so, for a moment, they spike, right? So there you have it. Again, oh, you look at all the states. It's the Republican states that have the high murder rates. That's because they have loose gun control laws. No, the Republican states are typically high in murder rates because the Democratic strongholds within them are murder havens. Louisiana, Mississippi, you look at them. It's always those that have the Democratic mayors are the ones that lead the country in murder rates. Because they're soft on crime. Like my video, subscribe to my channel.